Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, hello, Morgan Streetman, Pat George. Good to see both of you gentlemen today on this dreary day in Tampa Bay, but we'll get through it together.
Well, it is a dreary day today, and boy, we've got a bunch of interesting things to discuss today, and we're having a little bit of trouble here. I don't have a headset, which is odd to me now because it's like not having something over your ears. It's kind of a weird. It's kind of a weird feel. It's a weird feel. Mm-hmm. So, but Pat George is a good man, bringing me in a legitimate working headset. Let me give you the one that's not working. Speaking of working, if you took a look at any of the stuff we've done lately on our YouTube page, I mean, let me tell you, that has not been working. Ever since we did that climate change episode, which was that last week or was that the week before last?
It was 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Okay, yeah, 2 weeks ago. Boy, they have marked me for death on YouTube. I'm going to tell you, because we're getting like 1 view or 0 views on all of our videos, and I know we've got more people than that watching it. I mean, we don't have a million people, but I know we've got more than just 1 or 0 on all of our videos. And just to contrast it for you, like our mermaid video got 40 views, whereas anything on climate change has gotten 0 or 1. So, but ever since we talked about the realities of the climate change hysteria, we've been marked for death, or I've been marked for death. But
really, what it was, if you think about it, was more just a historical look.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't.
It was true.
It was just what's happened in the past in terms of what people have said about climate change.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just an interesting note. And folks, if you want to go check it out, go look at our YouTube page at Morgan Street Media, and you can check out some of our past videos and give us a like or a subscribe and help us out a little bit and try to help defeat these social media censors that are trying to keep the Morgan Streetman show down. It's interesting because last week we were expecting the IG report on FISA abuses to come out on Friday. That was what was announced, and that was even publicized on the Sunday shows. But then, of course, once we got into late Monday, that whole thing fell apart, and they decided they were going to delay it further. And now we don't know when that's going to be released. Could be the end of this week, or could be the end of the month, or even later. Who knows, right? So we had some of that news for you. And some other interesting things have been going on. I mean, I spent a lot of time on Saturday watching the Brexit stuff in UK Parliament. I don't know if a lot of folks are interested in that. I'm fascinated by the House of Commons and the proceedings there. The House of Lords, maybe a little bit less so. If you ever watch the House of Lords, it's a lot quieter than the House of Commons. The House of Commons is quite funny to watch because they're all yelling at each other, talking over each other, and it's really great theater. But anyway, they were trying to have the Brexit vote on Saturday on the deal that Prime Minister Johnson has secured to get the UK out of the EU, but that was tabled by an amendment that was voted on that required him to go back and ask for an extension to the EU again. Now, it doesn't sound like the EU is going to be inclined to want to give him an extension, but at the same time, I think they want to get an actual deal done as opposed to what they're calling a hard Brexit or a no-deal Brexit. So that should be going on essentially right now over in Parliament. I know they were going to try to push through another vote on the actual deal itself today, was the talk from Saturday. And, of course, Parliament hadn't met on a Saturday for like 37 years. It went all the way back to the Falklands War. So this was a pretty big deal to have them all in there on Saturday. And then the process of voting on the actual Brexit was kind of frustrated. But now we want to jump back to our U.S. politics. I'm going to skip our local interest this week because we've got so much to cover with U.S. politics. And one of the things I wanted to jump into is the Hunter Biden interview last week, because this kind of got lost in the shuffle, and you haven't seen a bunch of news made about this, but the Hunter Biden interview with Good Morning America. Now, we've kind of truncated the interview for you, or we've really annotated it to bring you the most important parts. And I wanted to start out with his denial that he ever discussed any of his business dealings with his dad. And you got to listen to this because he says no, but then he says, well, but then there was that one time. So you just got to listen to this. What Hunter Biden says, he never discussed Ukraine with his dad.
Did you and your father ever discuss Ukraine?
No. As I said, the only time was after a news account, and it wasn't a discussion in any way. There's no but to this. No.
I love it. No, but as I said, the only time was after a news account. Okay, well, that's not a no then. But he's like, but there's no but after this, even though I just did a but. But anyway, How about his qualifications for the Burisma board? You had to love this series of questions and answers as he goes through what his potential qualifications were to sit on this board where I think he was being paid, it's now coming out, maybe $83,000 a month for sitting on this board.
When he said, "I hope you know what you're doing," what did he think you were doing?
Well, he read the press reports that I joined the board of Burisma, which was a Ukrainian natural gas company. And there's been a lot of misinformation about me, not about my dad. Nobody buys that. But it buys this idea that I was unqualified to be on the board.
What were your qualifications to be on the board of Burisma?
Well, I was vice chairman of the board of Amtrak for 5 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program. I was a lawyer for Boies Schiller Flexner, one of the most prestigious law firms in the world.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though.
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board.
So an impressive board that Burisma's put together. You got to like it when the questioner then asks him a more introspective question.
I don't know why he just reminds me right now of he should be in an 80s movie, Big City, Bright Lights. What movie was that with Michael J. Fox? You know,
Oh, boy. I'm
You
not.
know what I'm talking about? I don't know why. That's just what comes to my mind when I hear him doing the interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you'll love this part because this is where he starts to get introspective about things. And I think this is hilarious when he's asked if maybe the Biden name had something to do with him getting that spot on the board.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
Including being on the Amtrak board, right? Because that was a gimme from his dad as well. Now, how about this where the interviewer asks him, about his regrets or whether he's made any mistakes? And I think these kind of questions are very revealing because he does state that he has some regrets and maybe he made a mistake in taking this board position.
Do you regret being on the board to begin with?
No, I don't regret being on the board. What I regret is not taking into account that there would be a Rudy Giuliani and a president of the United States that would be listening to this ridiculous conspiracy idea. Did I make a mistake? Well, maybe in the grand scheme of things, yeah. But did I make a mistake based upon some unethical lapse? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Did I make a mistake? Well, maybe, yeah. Maybe I did. Do I have some regrets? Well, I don't regret being on the board. I just regret the fact that there's a guy named Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump who were going to talk about it. That's what I regret, right? So does that ring hollow to anybody else? Well, another question, this sort of I thought was funny and maybe a little bit of a window into his personality. The interviewer gets a little bit close to some sensitive subjects, which is him being in and out of rehab so many times. And I just thought this was very revealing, the way he addressed her question to him, which he had to know this question was coming.
I've gone through my own struggles.
In and out of rehab 7-8 times.
Say it nicer to me.
Say it nicer to me.
Sought treatment
Sought
for
treatment.
an issue like
Sought
most
treatment
people.
for substance abuse
Yes,
issues
so
7 or 8
insensitive.
times. I'm so sorry. But I want, I think this is a human question.
Yeah.
Do you worry?
No, but for real, let me say
Do you
something.
worry that all of this noise, even though it's just noise,
No, I
it's
don't
still
worry.
that it could affect your sobriety?
Of course. Look, you don't want to live in the worry of it because then you're feeding the beast.
Feeding the beast, huh? Then you're feeding the beast. Boy. Well, I tell you what, it was a pretty pathetic interview, I thought, overall, and not very impressive when he's telling the questioner, you have to be nicer to me. I think that's a very telling look into a little bit of his personality and how he feels about these things.
I thought she was pretty nice.
I thought she was very nice. I mean, could she have lobbed softballs at him? She didn't turn the screws at all. She didn't say, well, what about where you said in the New Yorker that you talked to your dad about this stuff. What about that? I mean, they didn't take any of his statements, which, don't have the ring of truth to them, some of them, and try to fact check them or put him on the spot at all. It was a softball interview. But nevertheless, he says she really needs to be nicer to him. And, we've got Joe Biden's response to Hunter's interview at the debates, and we are going to cover that. But, we're coming up on a break. We don't have time to get to it before our break. So after the break, what we're going to do is we're going to get into Joe Biden's response to the Hunter Biden interview, where he trots out an old line that he's used before. I guess it must be one that gets a lot of support from the crowd for him, I don't know. I think it's a pretty lame line that he uses about beating Trump like a drum. Trump doesn't want to mess with me because I'll beat him like a drum. Okay, Joe, whatever you say. And then we're going to jump into some of the other Democrats and what they had to say at the debates. And you're not going to want to miss that because we've clipped the whole thing up for you. We've got the best of the Democrat debates all ready to go for you. So stick around, folks. We're going to cover all of that when we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We're going to get into what we learned from the Democratic debates. And just kind of a big picture, I was having this conversation about who is going to be the candidate for the Democrats. Talking about this last night. And it's so interesting. I know you're going to answer some of these questions, but when you have the Democrats, their sort of battle cry is multi-gendered, multi-geographic, multi. And yet 2 of the 3 top contenders are your older white guy.
Right.
So it's just kind of interesting. I thought that I made that observation that there's an anomaly there.
Biden and Sanders.
Or contradiction, I should say. Yes.
It was fascinating to watch the debates on CNN because this is right after some of that Project Veritas stuff came out, where they went and they actually captured the morning CNN phone calls that they have among all the newsrooms, where Jeff Zucker, the owner of CNN, sets the agenda for CNN. And according to these phone calls, he wants it to be impeachment all the time. And even to the point where the liberal CNN staff is getting sick of talking about impeachment and President Trump. And then you go and you watch the Dem debates, which are run by CNN and Anderson Cooper. And the first question out of the gate, which goes down the road, all of them, is what do you think about impeachment? And to me, I just thought that was hilarious, that right after it comes out that that's all they want to push is impeachment. That's the first question in the debates. But then Anderson Cooper gets to Joe Biden on a question, and we're going to skip the question part of it, although I had it clipped for you, but I've skipped it because we just don't have the time to do all of this justice. But, he goes through and talks about how, these are unfounded allegations against Hunter Biden, etc., and then asks Joe Biden the question about what does he think about it. So let's pick up with Joe Biden's answer.
Look, my son did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. I carried out the policy of the United States government in rooting out corruption in Ukraine. And that's what we should be focusing on. And what I wanted to make a point about, and my son's statement speaks for itself. He spoke about it today.
Oh, yeah, it does.
My son's statement speaks for itself. What I think is important is we focus on why it's so important to remove this man from office. On the 17th, look, the fact that George Washington worried on the first time he spoke after being elected president that what we had to worry about is foreign interference in our elections. It was the greatest threat to America. This president on three occasions, has invited foreign governments and heads of government to get engaged in trying to alter our elections. The fact is that it is outrageous. Rudy Giuliani, the president, and his thugs have already proven that they, in fact, are flat lying. What we have to do now is focus on Donald Trump. He doesn't want me to be the candidate. He's going after me because he knows if I get the nomination, I will beat him like a drum.
Hold on, sorry.
I mean, there we go again with Biden with his kind of like 1950s high school football threats. I will beat you like a drum. Do you know that?
Wow.
I will. Look, listen here. I will beat you like a drum, son. And it went on more like that because, of course, he doesn't want to admit that there could be any problem with what his son did with respect to that Ukrainian gas company for which he had no experience and got paid $3 million. Boy, wouldn't you like to get paid $3 million to sit on a board where you have no experience in the industry and you're not actually asked to do anything? I know I would. And you don't think there's a little bit of corruption there? Don't forget what he said about his name being Biden. Mm-hmm. He doesn't think he would have gotten that board spot if his name wasn't Biden. Now, of course, as he said, he doesn't think he would have gotten a lot of things in his life if his name wasn't Biden. You remember a couple...
He's honest.
Yeah, well, at least he's honest sometimes, right? Sometimes when you listen to the full answer, you'll hear the honesty in the answer. It'll be surrounded by some dishonesty. But if you listen hard, you'll hear the honesty coming out, just like when he said he has regrets and he has made mistakes, maybe. So you remember a couple of weeks ago when Elizabeth Warren was on the Colbert show, what's the show? The Tonight, anyway, whatever it is, the late night show with Colbert.
Stephen Colbert.
Yeah. And, he kind of confronted her on this repeated failure to be honest about whether or not she's going to raise taxes on the middle class. Well, she kept the con going at the debate. I mean, she really kept it going. So she dodges the question multiple times. And I want you to hear this from her.
But you have not specified how you're going to pay for the most expensive plan, Medicare for All. Will you raise taxes on the middle class to pay for it, yes or no?
So I have made clear what my principles are here, and that is costs will go up for the wealthy and for big corporations, and for hardworking middle-class families, costs will go down.
Now, this was a yes or no question that she directly dodges, so they even follow up on it.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, aren't we up against another vote that we have to have because the government's going to shut down because there's no money left? Isn't that coming in the next couple of weeks or so?
Probably.
So we don't even have to ask her that question.
That's right.
In order to pay for that program, yes, we have to have increase in tax. You have to.
I mean, that's expected. I mean, that's everybody who's looked at this knows there's a huge deficit between what she says she wants to do and what we can afford to do. But let's listen to the follow-up.
Senator Warren, to be clear, Senator Sanders acknowledges he's going to raise taxes on the middle class to pay for Medicare for All. You've endorsed his plan. Should you acknowledge it too?
So the way I see this, it is about what kinds of costs middle-class families are going to face. So let me be clear on this. Costs will go up for the wealthy. They will go up for big corporations. And for middle-class families, they will go down. I will not sign a bill into law that does not lower costs for middle-class families.
So let me be clear as I dodge the question.
You know what I hear in there? I'm picturing punctuation. Costs will go up for corporations and for middle-class families. Do you put the period at the end of corporations or do you put it after?
That's right. That's right. Costs aren't going down for anybody, folks.
No.
Anytime you get the government involved in something, you get a lot of inefficiency and waste. Now, Mayor Pete, zeroes right in on this because he wants to know how the hole that she's describing, and she is describing a hole in her deficit, how is that supposed to get filled? Let's listen here.
Mayor Buttigieg, you say Senator Warren has been, quote, evasive about how she's going to pay for Medicare for All. What's your response?
Well, we heard it tonight, a yes or no question that didn't get a yes or no answer. Look, this is why people here in the Midwest are so frustrated with Washington in general and Capitol Hill in particular. Your signature, Senator, is to have a plan for everything, except this. No plan has been laid out to explain how a multi-trillion-dollar hole in this Medicare for All plan that Senator Warren is putting forward is supposed to get filled in.
Exactly. No plan has been put forward to say how she's going to pay for this, how she's going to pay for it. Now, just as to have a little bit of fun with this, I had to go through on Elizabeth Warren and pull out all the time she began her answers with the word so, because, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Hate that. Well,
so
it just, if you listen to the debate, I mean, it was like every single answer. So let's run that clip.
Senator Warren, respond, please. Senator Warren, your response.
So I think this is about, understand. So you started this question with how you got something done.
You know what? You could put a lot of so's together for me because I say so a lot. But at least I'm asking the questions. I'm not giving answers.
Well, there you go.
If you're asking a question, you say so. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But if you're answering a question, you don't need a so.
And if you're a public speaker and you find yourself saying the same words over and over again, you need to make a conscious effort to try to vary that up a little bit. But, one of the most interesting answers that I heard from Elizabeth Warren all night is the following. And I hope we've got time to get to it before the break. I don't know exactly how much. We've got about 2 minutes, so we do have time. We're going to jump into it. But I want you to listen carefully, particularly toward the latter half of this answer, because this is revolutionary what she's talking about doing to the boards of directors of businesses. She wants to put non-shareholders and give them a significant amount of control over the board. Listen here.
So the data show that we've had a lot of problems with losing jobs, but the principal reason has been bad trade policy. The principal reason has been a bunch of corporations, giant multinational corporations, who've been calling the shots on trade, giant multinational corporations that have no loyalty to America. They have no loyalty to American workers. They have no loyalty to American consumers. They have no loyalty to American communities. They are loyal only to their own bottom line. I have a plan to fix that. And it's accountable capitalism. It says you want to have one of the giant corporations in America, then by golly, 40% of your board of directors should be elected by your employees.
Listen to that.
That'll make a difference when a corporation decides, gee, we could save a nickel by moving a job to Mexico, when there are people on the board in the boardroom saying, no. Do you know what that does to our company? Do you know what that does to our community, to what it does to our workers? We also need to make it easier to join a union and give unions more power when they negotiate.
So she wants to force 40% of the board of directors to be controlled by the employees. That is a huge change in corporate law. It's a huge change in property rights. It's absolutely revolutionary and would really harm business. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We are running through some clips from the debate that we may or may not have watched last week for the Democrats, but Morgan's watched all of it. You've got all the minutia, all the big picture stuff as well.
Yeah, I bet a lot of our audience didn't actually watch the debates.
And I couldn't turn it on.
I have to say, it was pretty painful.
Oh.
It was pretty painful. But I, as your dutiful reporter, I watched the entire thing, made little notes of all the moments that I wanted to clip up. And, of course, I wound up with something like 27 different audio clips. So, I mean, there was quite a bit I wanted to call your attention to in the debates themselves. And, you know, something we were discussing during the break is, are we going to see a movement towards the center from some of these Democrat candidates? Because they've been running, they've been racing each other to get to the left, or what we would call the left. In other words, getting to be more liberal, more radical. The policies that they're talking about, I mean, they're talking about things like wealth taxes. You know, let's tax the billionaires out of existence. And that's essentially what Bernie Sanders endorsed. And then it's pretty funny as a follow-on to that, because there actually was a billionaire on the stage. But first, let's hear Bernie Sanders. Now, I had to speed up the part at the beginning of his answer, which is over a minute, where he uses a bunch of examples. And it isn't until the end of his answer that he actually answers the question about what he wants to do with billionaires. So listen here.
The top 1% now own more of this nation's wealth than the bottom 90% combined. Senator Sanders, when you introduced your wealth tax, which would tax the assets of the wealthiest Americans, you said, quoting you, Senator, billionaires should not exist.
Listen,
Is
billionaires
the goal
should
of your
not
plan
exist.
to tax billionaires out of existence?
When you have 500,000 Americans sleeping out on the street today,
that's me speeding it up for you right there.
Yes, that's exactly what I believe.
Perfect.
So you have to listen.
it
You
all
have
in
to
there.
sort of speed through all the examples that he gives of Americans sleeping on the streets and other terrible things to finally get to him saying, yes, he wants to get rid of billionaires. But even the billionaire, Tom Steyer, which how the heck did he even get on the stage? I mean, you got to think, how much money did he give CNN? I mean, I'm sure that's not really the case, but I mean, how much money did that guy, because where did he come from? He just out of the blue, oh, Tom Steyer's now on the stage. He was a candidate. I didn't realize that.
He's got political commercials already running that I saw yesterday twice on television.
Well, he's a billionaire, right? But listen, he's really a billionaire for the little people. Now, I want you to listen to this answer, because the hypocrisy of these people knows no bounds.
Mr. Steyer, you are the lone billionaire on this stage. What's your plan for closing the income gap?
Well, first of all, let me say this. Senator Sanders is right. There have been 40 years where corporations have bought this government And those 40 years have meant a 40-year attack on the rights of working people and specifically on organized labor. And the result.
So he just buys in. That was right after Sanders just said he wants to get rid of billionaires. So then the billionaire says he's exactly right. Well, you know what, Mr. Billionaire? Who in the heck is stopping you from giving your billions of dollars away to working people? I mean, seriously, you want to give our money away, the American taxpayers' money. You think that needs to be given away. Well, why don't you start with your money? Why don't you give your money away first before you start trying to give our money away? Because you got billions of dollars. You're in a lot better position than most of our listeners, or probably all of our listeners, to be giving money away. Give it out of your own pocket first. But you know what? These limousine liberals, these radicals, they don't ever want to give their own money away. They don't ever want to forego their nice cars and their nice homes and give that money away to somebody else.
You know, it's interesting. These Democrats are very interested in demonizing corporations. And I know what my corporation does for me. They provide me with health care.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's probably better health care than what I would get if I was getting it for free.
Well, that's right, particularly if you were getting Medicaid
from
for
the government,
all.
right.
Right. Well, you know, Joe Biden couldn't miss out on this train, so listen to him talking about whether he's going to, and you got to love this. I mean, Biden was confused throughout the night. So here he is. First, he's saying he's going to eliminate the capital gains tax, and then he's going to double it.
You have warned against demonizing rich people. Do you believe that Senator Sanders and Senator Warren's wealth tax plans do that?
No, look, demonizing wealth people, what I talked about is how you get things done. And the way to get things done is take a look at the tax code right now. The idea, we have to start rewarding work, not just wealth. I would eliminate the capital gains tax. I would raise the capital gains tax to the highest rate of 39.5%. I would double it.
I would eliminate it. No, I mean, I would double it. I don't mean eliminate. I mean double. I mean raise it. Wow.
So confusing.
Poor guy. You know, and he got made fun of a lot about for this quote about clipping coupons in the stock market, which is you know, okay, there's some basis to that, but that would be in bonds. You would have coupons that you might clip, I suppose, you know, back in the 80s or something. You know, so there's some reference to it, but I tell you what, he sure does sound stuck in the past. But here he is about people clipping coupons in the stock market.
Guess what? Why in God's name should someone who's clipping coupons in the stock market pay a lower tax rate than someone who, in fact, is, like I said, a school teacher and a firefighter? It's ridiculous, and they pay a lower tax. Secondly, the idea that we, in fact, engage in this notion that there's $1 trillion. $640 billion in tax loopholes. You can't justify a minimum $600 billion of that. We could eliminate it all. I could go into detail had I the time. Secondly, thirdly, what we need to do is we need to go out and make it clear to the American people that we are going to raise taxes on the wealthy. We're going to reduce tax burdens on those who are not.
And if you're hearing this, you are wealthy, right? Under his definition.
Why should someone who's calling a friend from a payphone about what movie to rent from Blockbuster?
That's right. Clipping the Blockbuster coupons. Well, he went so far as to even make up a new word, which you got to love this. This was in answering a question about gun control, and he wants everybody to have to register their quote-unquote assault weapons. But you got to love this new word that we got to add to our lexicon here.
Exponentially.
Not exponentially, but
exponentially.
Got it.
I'm sorry, but I like it when politicians make up new words. I love it.
That involves when you actually spit your dentures out of your mouth. That's exponentially, right? And then Biden, I mean, the gaffes didn't stop there. I mean, they just kept going. So then he tries to convince us, and this one I thought was particularly rich. He tried to convince us that regime change in Syria has never been the goal. I mean, we've been in Syria. We started this whole civil war over there. You know, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives. Certainly hundreds of thousands and even millions have lost their homes and become refugees. But now we learn from Joe Biden, and we've been there 10 years, we learned regime change was never the goal.
With regard to regime change in Syria, that has not been the policy to change the regime. It has been to make sure that the regime did not wipe out hundreds and thousands of innocent people between there and the Iraqi border. And lastly, and I apologize for going out, but lastly, what is happening in Iraq is in Afghanistan, as well as all the way over to Syria. We have ISIS that's going to come here. They are going to, in fact, damage the United States of America. That's why we got involved in the first place and not ceded the whole area to Assad and to the Russians.
Oh, man. Is this making any sense to any of y'all? Poor Joe. It's not making a lot of sense to him either. And, of course, we got to really worry about this because, of course, according to him, if President Trump gets reelected, that's the end of NATO. Listen here. I bet you didn't know this.
But here's the deal. Think what that did. He turns around and he questions whether or not he'll keep the sacred commitment of Article 5 for the NATO members. If he is reelected, I promise you, there will be no NATO. Our security will be vastly underrated. We will be in real trouble.
Real trouble, I tell you, we'll be in real trouble. Well, particularly when you've got the Russians invading us from every direction. And this is the new language that the Democrats are using, which, again, they keep changing the meaning of words, kind of like when they say things like, misgendering a trans person is violence. That's a violent attack because it could subject the person to being attacked by someone else. No, misgendering somebody or whatever you want to call it, those are verbal. Those are words. That's not a physical attack. But now we'll learn that Russia and their meddling in our election, which, remember, was to the tune of less than $50,000 in total, that their meddling in our election was actually an invasion. And guess what? The invasion's ongoing. Just listen to Beto O'Rourke.
We must be unafraid in ensuring that we hold Russia accountable for invading the world's greatest democracy. And being able to do it, thanks to Donald Trump, functionally with impunity so far, so much so that they are invading this democracy right now as we speak, still at the invitation of this president.
So they're invading it now as we speak. The invasion's underway, folks. Have you looked around? Have you noticed the Russian soldiers on your block? Well, Beto wasn't the only one to use this type of language. Amy Klobuchar also talked about Russia being invading our elections at this time. And I thought this was interesting because amid all this anti-Russia fervor, we have Joe Biden coming forward and confessing something that, were it anybody but a Democrat politician, this would land them under a multi-year federal investigation. And oh my gosh, we can't be sure whether this person is loyal to the United States or not. I mean, listen to what Biden says about spending time alone with Putin.
I think it doesn't make me any better or worse, but maybe the only person who spent extensive time alone with Putin as well as with Erdogan.
So he spent extensive time alone with Putin? I mean, what did they talk about? What did they talk about during that extensive time alone? Did they talk about the coming invasion that they're talking about now? I mean, makes one wonder, doesn't it? Why isn't Joe Biden under investigation? How did he get away from his handlers to spend time alone with Vladimir Putin? Because I remember when Donald Trump tried to have a private meeting with Vladimir Putin, that was national headlines about we could not allow that. We could not allow him to be deceived by Vladimir Putin. And if he got alone with him, God knows what Putin might say. I mean, oh my goodness. We've got one more for you that we're going to play on the other side of the break. And this is almost like going into a parallel universe because this one, and we're almost going to finish our clips. We had to drop a few of them, but this clip is worth hearing. And this one is where Kamala Harris starts talking about shutting down President Trump's Twitter account because she believes very strongly that Twitter ought to just shut the president's account down. I mean, he's got 65 million followers, right? And they ought to just shut it down, silence him. If you don't agree with somebody in this country, don't try to win an argument with them. Don't try to have a marketplace of ideas. Just shut them down. Stop them from talking. I don't agree. Stop talking. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We've been getting a good, very insightful recap of what happened during the Democrat debates. But we don't really know where this is leading. We don't know who the front runner is going to be at this point. That's kind of interesting.
Right. And we've got the potential for a couple of other people maybe jumping in. But, some of our early front runners like Kamala Harris have really fizzled out, and it doesn't look like she's coming back. And particularly when you look at her debate performance, even though she was trying to be more forceful, she's just a little bit tone deaf. I mean, folks, we have the freedom of speech in this country. Now, if they want to flip over and say that Twitter and Facebook are publishers and are responsible for the content that they publish, and it seems like that may be the direction that things are going, then they got to be responsible for a lot more stuff, including things like letting the New Zealand shooting go out over Facebook Live and other types of things. They're going to be responsible and sued for a lot of stuff. But as of right now, I think they're still trying to operate in the public square or in free speech type of territory. But listen to what Kamala Harris had to say about what we need to do with President Trump's Twitter account.
Here we have Donald Trump, who has 65 million Twitter followers, and is using that platform as the president of the United States to openly intimidate witnesses, to threaten witnesses, to obstruct justice. And he and his account should be taken down. We saw in El Paso that shooter in his manifesto was informed by how Donald Trump uses that platform. And this is a matter of corporate responsibility. Twitter should be held accountable and shut down that site. It is a matter of safety and corporate accountability.
They don't want President Trump having a direct line to the American people. They want everything to have to go through the mainstream media. Now, I got to just beg out just a little bit of personal indulgence here because I have to share one more clip, and this kind of goes with the out there theme. And this was a commercial that played during the Democrat debates, which I found very interesting, and it featured President Reagan's son, his kind of disfavored son, frankly, Ron Reagan. But listen here to what he has to say about the group that he's advertising for.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
Wow. Wow. That was his commercial. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, Ron. I certainly hope that doesn't happen to you. And I hope that doesn't happen to anyone out there, but I guess that's what they're suggesting.
That goes in line with so many more people are reporting atheist agnostic.
That's right. That's right. We've never had that in this country before where so many people are identifying
How old is that commercial?
That's a brand new commercial.
Oh.
That's a brand new. That was just came out. In fact, I think it debuted there at the Democrat debates. Well, speaking of burning in hell, how about we go out there now and let's talk about the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And not just the legend of Sleepy Hollow, but one of the main characters in that legend, which was what? The Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman. You remember that? He would chase Ichabod Crane across that bridge, and he had the burning jack-o'-lantern that he would throw at him. Of course, the legend of Sleepy Hollow was a book that was written by Washington Irving, and it was published in 1820, and it actually referred to a legend that apparently did exist there in Sleepy Hollow. Now, Sleepy Hollow is a town in New York in the Hudson Valley, and it's about 10 miles from White Plains, New York. Now, in October 1776, the Continental Army under George Washington was actually encamped in White Plains, New York. They had suffered some major defeats, particularly in August of that year, and they'd lost control of the city of New York, which was one of our major cities, to the British. So by October, the Army had mostly fallen back to the area of White Plains, New York, and the British and their mercenaries, their German mercenaries that they brought over with them, which were the Hessians. The Hessians were German mercenaries who were paid by the British to come over and essentially help fight the war. Now remember, the British wore red coats, but the Hessians wore blue coats, and they were considered to be fearsome and merciless warriors. They were sort of feared by the Continental Army as being much more fearsome than just the redcoats. So they pursued the Continental Army to White Plains, New York, and on October 28th of 1776, there was the Battle of White Plains, New York, and many people say that this is where the Headless Horseman was formed. But actually, there was a follow-on skirmish after the battle that took place on November 1st, 1776, And Major General William Heath of the American Army reported that during that battle, a cannon was fired at one of the German artillery positions, the Hessian artillery positions, and it actually took the head clean off of a Hessian artilleryman, and that was actually reported. And so that was probably the genesis of the idea of the Headless Horseman. Now, whether he actually came back and haunted the area or not is open to debate. But of course, remember, White Plains is only about 10 miles from Sleepy Hollow. So where the skirmish occurred would have been very close to Sleepy Hollow, New York. Now, of course, shortly thereafter, a couple of months later, we had a pivotal battle called the Battle of Trenton in New Jersey, and that was December 26, 1776. And many people consider that to be the turning point of the Revolutionary War. And it's where the Continental Army, led by George Washington, actually snuck into the town and surprised and captured the entire brigade of Hessians who were in the middle of their Christmas celebration and hadn't quite slept it all off yet. And the Continental Army swooped in and captured them. And that's widely considered to be the turning point of the Revolutionary War. So all of this is happening right up in that area and right in line with the story and the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, lest you think that the only place where we've got headless horse people is here in the U.S., in a small town in Hudson Valley, New York, you would be wrong, because the Irish also have a legend of a headless horseman. Now, in Irish folklore, it's called a Dullahan, and that is the dark man. And it's a headless fairy creature, and he sometimes carries his head under his arm as well. Now, sometimes he's riding a horse, and sometimes he's driving a horse-drawn carriage. But when he shows up, it always portends death. And if you remember, we talked a little bit about Darby O'Gill and the Little People last week. Well, at the end of that show, guess who shows up? Remember, you had the Banshee, and the Banshee was howling at him. And he goes, and Darby O'Gill goes outside, and then what's coming? The death coach. And the death coach rides up, and the entity, the creature that is in charge or piloting that coach is headless. So it's another headless horseman. So now I've just taken the headless horseman myth from Sleepy Hollow, New York, and I've tied it back in with our Irish folklore and the Banshee and Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And I'll tell you what, if you want to be something great for Halloween, the Headless Horseman is always a good choice because it's pretty easy to do, right? You just put your shirt over your head. That's all you got to do, and button it up, or your jacket, and you're set. You're ready to go. You're the Headless Horseman. Thanks for sticking with us, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.